Hey everyone, this is Shane Mojavier, President of Funder Intel, and today SBA loans. That's our topic with our guest, Glenn Giro. He's a VP of SBA Lending with Huntington National Bank. Glenn, I appreciate you being on with me.
Appreciate you having me, Shane.
Thanks. So, we're going to get into a deep dive into what you do, a little bit about Huntington Bank, your area of expertise, what the market is doing, how things are looking for the next year or so, how brokers can partner with you, and a little bit more. But yeah, first tell me a little bit about, what National Bank is and your area that you cover.
Yeah, so Huntington National Bank is a Midwestern regional bank by footprint. We do have some presence kind of out west. We acquired TCF Bank a little over a year ago, and that gave us some presence in like Minnesota and Colorado. But for the most part, a Midwestern regional kind of full service bank. But I am part of the SBA division of the bank, and actually with SBA Lending, we're a nationwide lender. So I'm based in Nashville, Tennessee. We do not have any branches here, so I am basically what we call kind of a remote lender. So don't have a branch kind of feeding me deals. I am kind of a man on the street. So I partner with obviously, local state brokers, business owners to do deals locally, but obviously also with a national lending opportunity as well. So I do deals all over the country, and that's what I love doing most.
Okay, and that's all 50 states then, right? Or
so technically not Alaska. Sorry, those
okay,
listening
yeah,
in Alaska and Hawaii. We are just in the lower 48, I guess you could say.
got it. All right, perfect. So then, I mean, you've been in finance for a little while now. How did you get started in banking?
Yeah, so I was a finance major at the University of Tennessee. So obviously, kind of a natural transition is like, well, I've got a finance degree. Kind of banking is kind of the I guess one of the most probably commonly traveled paths with that. And so I actually started kind of a wild time to get into banking was in 2008.
Oh, wow.
So I was while the housing market was crashing and the financial markets were crashing, I started my banking career. And so I was with Chase Bank in Chicago.
Okay.
Kind of just moved up there. Actually moved up there for the job. Kind of a personal banker. So kind of one of those things where you kind of you would walk into a bank and need help, and I'd be the one that would kind of sit with you. And it was a little bit of a good experience because it allowed me to kind of see the bank from a few different lines of business. So I actually had investments license, so I could do a little bit of that. Obviously was doing personal banking. I would do a little bit of business banking, and there was a kind of a mortgage officer in the branch as well. So kind of got a good idea of the different career paths you could go within the banking channel, and quickly realized that like the conversations with business owners are always kind of my favorite, because you try to talk to somebody about investments in 2008. Again, the conversation wasn't really going to go anywhere, but you sit down and you say, oh, you're a business owner. Like, how'd you get into this? And they would open up. And so just kind of quickly realize that, hey, this business banking channel is the channel I'd like to go. So kind of within early on in my banking career, kind of transitioned into a kind of a small business specialist role. And then kind of to what we call out, a business banking relationship manager. So kind of managing the entire relationship. So from lending to treasury to deposits, kind of across the board. And then ultimately made the move to Huntington, and Huntington kind of opened my eyes to the world of SBA, and realized that, I always liked the lending piece. Like that was always my favorite part, to get like a set of financials and a request. Like to me, it was always kind of like this fun kind of puzzle you kind of put together, right? They have a request. Let's see if you can qualify, or let's position you so that you can put together the strongest application possible. So
Sure.
Huntington afforded me the opportunity to kind of get into the SBA world, where all I was doing is lending. And then ultimately, kind of making the announcement that they were moving back to the Tennessee market, which was where I kind of grew up. And so it was kind of the best of both worlds. Now I could just focus on lending, working with business owners. Oh, and by the way, kind of help grow the SBA kind of footprint into my home state. So it couldn't have gone any better. I'm extremely appreciative of Huntington for allowing me that opportunity to do that.
Very nice. Okay. And that was when? Just not long ago?
Yeah. So that was so basically about a year ago. So I moved
Okay.
back to Tennessee kind of last August.
Nashville, right?
Yep, that's right.
There you go. Okay. All right. So talk to me about, where things are now with SBA loans. We went through the pandemic. It seems like, with the different loans, including SBA and PPP, all that, business owners are more familiar. with some of the processes. Obviously, it doesn't transfer over to 7A and so forth, but they're just a little bit more comfortable, I feel. What are your thoughts on that and how things are going with either volume or units?
I think the program is more popular now than it's ever been. I think kind of a couple things. I think SBA it's a program that's been around for a while, and so it's not something new. I think a lot of banks were kind of it's one of those things where you, as a bank, you kind of have to be heavily invested in the program in terms of this, because obviously you have to have preferred lender status with the SBA to be able to underwrite the deals and bring and kind of keep them in house. If you don't have a preferred lender status, you actually have to physically mail off essentially a paper application of the
No
SBA and
way.
kind of like, yeah, that's still a
Wow.
thing. So
Jeez.
obviously having a preferred lender status is huge, right? But
Okay.
to do so, that means now you have to have a really, kind of a built out department, because not only do you need people like me, which are kind of the customer facing person that kind of explains the program and kind of helps guide people through the process. You need
Hmm.
specialized underwriters. You need specialized kind of eligibility officers. You need specialized loan closers. You need, it's such a specialty loan program that you can't just kind of half do it, right? You have to kind of commit the resource, or else it's going to be a really kind of choppy process, or you're not going to get much information up front. You're going to run into a bank and they're going to be like, you want an SBA loan? Okay, well, submit tax returns and then we'll get back to you, right? There's not going to be that kind of back and forth that really needs to go on, because you need to know exactly what the program details are and what's eligible and what's not eligible, and kind of know like, hey, what are your weaknesses and how can we mitigate them? And so anyways, going back to your original question,
No, you're fine.
I think a
Yeah.
lot of people, I think a lot of people have realized that if done correctly, it's a great program, because ultimately what you're doing is you're helping small business. You've got a government guarantee behind the loan, so you're lowering your risk in terms of the bank. And without getting into too many details, it's actually a profitable loan product for the bank. And so, I think what's happened with PPP, with the IDL, you have a lot of banks that have kind of seen like, okay, if done, with these new programs, if we grow the right way and we embrace kind of SBA lending, this is a profitable, essentially loan product for the bank if done correctly. And
Hmm.
so, as somebody who's in the world now and has seen, recruiters are out, right, everywhere. And obviously there's a lot of banks looking to build out their SBA department. So from somebody who's currently in it, it's good, right? You want to know that this is a program that's being embraced by a lot of banks. And so, obviously I get recruiters reach out to me all the time, and I'm obviously happy where I'm at, but it's good,
Right.
right? You'd want that. Like if your
Sure.
phone's not ringing with people interested, that's typically not the best sign. If you got a lot of people wanting to grow their that department, it means, the banks see the opportunity to get involved in a great kind of small business lending program.
Absolutely. Yeah, makes sense. With the ones that you cover, and give us what you can on the typical SBA loan or what's needed for the types of deals that you do.
Yep. So I specialize in the SBA 7A program. And the nice thing about that program is it's really versatile in the uses. So for everything from startup, and that could be true startup with your own unique concept, it could be franchise startup, to business acquisition. So looking to buy a business, you can use it for that. You can use it to buy, what we call owner occupied commercial real estate. You can use it to buy your partner out, to refinance debt, to buy equipment. It's got a bunch of uses, and that's what makes the program so versatile. So it's not just, and what I like to tell people is it's not just and this kind of comes back to the coaching that I do, right? Because you think that if I'm going to buy a business, I'm just going to get an acquisition loan and that's it. Well, what's great about the 7A program is not only can we finance the purchase of the business, we can build in some additional working capital if you need it. If that business has some old equipment, we could build in some new equipment with that. And obviously, depending on the request, the equity injection can
Hmm.
vary. But the
Hmm.
idea is lower equity injection kind of requirements than conventional lending. And so it's a pretty favorable program. But obviously, just like with anything, it has to qualify. It's a cash flow program, so you have to show the ability to repay, whether it's through projections or historical financials.
Hmm.
So there's definitely an underwriting component to it as well.
Okay. And are you pretty deeply involved in the underwriting part, or?
So I like to say that I do an informal underwriting up front, right? There's
Okay.
things that I can do because if I'm submitting a deal, if I'm going to go through the steps to submit a deal, because to build the application, I have to do a write up. It can take a few hours depending on the complexity of the deal. So
Hmm.
before I get to that point, I'm going to do a little bit of an informal underwriting myself. And so
Got
what
it.
that's going to look like is it's really obviously depending on the request,
Hmm.
but obviously there's a component of understanding the transaction. What are the, what are the components of that transaction? Is it an acquisition of an existing business? Is it somebody looking to start up a business? And then making sure that, first off, right off the bat, right, is first of all, do they have the required equity injection to put into the deal, right? So if you want to buy a business per SBA kind of guidelines, you need to have 10% equity injection.
Okay.
And so the question is okay, well, how much kind of liquidity do you have, or how much access to capital do you have? Because that's going to be kind of a first question. If you're looking to buy a business and you have no money to put toward it, that's going to kind of be a hard stop right there.
Tough
Or
one.
obviously, if you're
Right.
looking to start a business as well, you're not going to get 100% financing on a startup, right? So
Sure.
somebody comes to me and says, Glenn, I've got this great idea. My background's in it, like everything lines up. But at the end of the day, well, how much can you put toward the project?
Right.
And so obviously that component as well. So from an underwriting standpoint, I want to understand kind of the strength of the borrowers. I'm gonna do some cash flow analysis on the business, right? Because we're essentially adding debt to a business, and we want to make sure historically that it shows and can support that debt. So there's some cash flow calculations that I can do. There's a little bit of art to that because there's add backs. Some are eligible things to add back. Some, that a broker would love to add back everything at 100%. So you see that kind of seller discretionary earnings number on every business listing. But then we'll go in and I'll kind of do my own math, and I'll say, hey, it lines up to what they're saying, or, we're going to probably not add this back, and that's going to adjust things. And so, bottom line is, once I hit submit,
Hmm.
it's not a guaranteed approval. I'm not an underwriter, but at least I feel like, this is worth kind of underwriting. And I think we got a decent shot of getting this thing approved.
All right. And so let's switch gears a little bit. So with just rates going up, fears of this, that, or the other with the economy. What's in store for the next year? What are your thoughts of business lending overall from your point of view?
Yeah. Let me check the crystal ball real quick, right?
Right.
So this has been a pretty wild year from a lending standpoint, and obviously the interest rate is kind of the first thing that pops up. I mean, we're with our 7A loans, we're typically tied to the prime rate, right? We typically will put a fixed kind of spread over prime. Well, on January 1st this year, prime was like 3.25. The Fed has raised rates on 5 different occasions this year, so it has been a ripping the Band-Aid off. We're going to control inflation. Let's just continue to do rate hikes until we see that inflation number kind of come down a little bit. So what's happened is obviously the inflation number hasn't come down like the Fed has liked. And so they've kind of continually obviously bumped up that rate. Now, what's going to happen in the next 12 to 24 months? I'm not going to pretend like I know for sure, but I will say this, the great thing about the lending program is a good deal is still a good deal in a low interest rate environment and a high interest rate environment. And so I'm talking to borrowers, and obviously they're a little bit nervous. They got this business that they like. Rates are higher than, especially when we're coming off historically low rates, right? When you bought a house last year and your rate was 2.5%, and now you want to buy a business and your rates in like the 8-9% range, it's a little bit of sticker shock.
Right.
But again, we underwrite the deals, right? We're going to make sure it cash flows. We're going to make sure that the business looks good historically. We're going to make sure you're a qualified borrower. Like, we're not, our standards aren't changing. The interest rate will change. And obviously we have to change some of our underwriting metrics.
Yeah, I was
to
gonna say the
match.
margin has to be a little bit different for the business owner's perspective.
Yeah.
They just know they're going to pay more,
Yep.
For the capital.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, it still has to cash flow, right? Like, we're still going to stress test that at a higher rate than what you're going to be paying. So we got to make sure that if rates go up again, this business is still profitable.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's one of those things where you talk to borrowers. If they find a business they like, I'm happy to give them some feedback on, how does it look from a cash flow standpoint? How does this deal be structured? How we can help. But at the end of the day, the rates are going to do what they're going to do. It's in SBA term, SBA 7A loan, without real estate, it's a 10-year term. You think about the 10-year economic cycle, it tends to have over a 10-year period of time, like it kind of has its ups and downs. Like, we're kind of in this period of time where, rising interest rate environment. But you would think ultimately, whether it's next year or 2 or 3 years, those rates will eventually come down a little bit.
Right.
And, if your business was profitable at a high interest rate environment, the hope is that if the business continues to operate well, when those rates come down, hopefully your profitability will follow.
You mentioned that you work with different referral partners, brokers. How can brokers work with you, or what is it that you look for in a partnership with a broker, a loan broker?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, communication is always key, right? With any relationship. And so I've got some really good relationships with brokers. And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll bring me kind of a business they're about to list. And they'll say, hey, Glenn, just kind of, you see like pre-approvals for SBA, and some of, like how much weight do those carry? It can be debated whether they mean anything or they mean something. But I
Hmm.
guess kind of what I like to do is that example with cash flow that I was kind of talking about is like I'll run the kind of the numbers, and I'll kind of make some assumptions on equity injection, and I'll ask them, hey, is the seller willing to take a seller's note? Like, let's just kind of see what that would look like. And then I'll kind of run the numbers, and I'll go back to the broker, and I always like to kind of like share my, let's do a Zoom call, and I'll share my screen, and I'll let you kind of see how the cash flow and how it looks and the ratios. And I think it's great to get that visual, because at the end of the day, they have to set proper expectations with the seller as well, right? That you have a seller that probably wants top dollar, but then you have to, bank financing is going to be part of that acquisition. You kind of have to set proper expectations on what financing could potentially help with.
Right.
And so, just a good relationship. Obviously, I'm always going to keep brokers updated as it progresses, and vice versa, keep me updated. But I always say, let me be, sometimes the seller needs a little bit of a little bit, well, I guess kind of like a wake up call if they're asking for way too much. And I'll tell a broker, like, let me be the bad guy. Like,
Right.
hey, I
Right.
talked
Good
to my
guy, bad
SBA
guy.
lender. I talked to my SBA lender, and he says you're asking for 3 million, but you're only gonna get $1 million loan. So do you want to do a seller's note for 2 million? I like so. So yeah, great. Obviously great communication. Trust is everything. If they're gonna send a borrower to me, like that relationship's gotta mean everything to me. Like, I need that communication to be spot on. I need to be open and honest, and make sure the process flows, because the SBA loan process, it is not this easy, like, submit some tax returns, approved, let's close next week. It is
Right.
again, I kind of tell people the reason why this program's been around for so long is because it's got a lot of rules to it. It's hard.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to, you can't abuse it. Underwriting's tight, documentation's everything. The SBA makes the rules the way they are, so that you have to provide documentation for financials, for personal financials. We have to order tax transcripts. We got to verify where's the money coming from to buy the business. We need bank statements. Everything has got to line up, or else you could lose that guarantee that's on loan. And the banks know that, right? No
Hmm.
one deal is worth kind of taking a shortcut to close. Every bank that's doing it right will make
Hmm.
sure everything lines up. And so from that standpoint, communication is key. Like, it can be a painful process, but if you're updating them along the way, and there's
Right.
not these large gaps of like silent time where they're wondering what the heck's going on, at least you can kind of manage expectations and say, I always try to, how long is it going to take? I try to kind of be conservative on that,
Hmm.
because it can take time, and weird things pop up that could delay closing. And so, again,
And that's,
just trying to
do you have an
set proper.
average? Yeah, sorry about that. You have an average, like, is it like 45, 60 days now or right now, or?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. It
Right.
depends what's involved in the transaction, right? If
Gotcha.
it's a simple business expansion, where
Hmm.
maybe a business just needs a loan to buy some new equipment, payroll, some marketing, advertising, like that's quick, maybe 45 days on something like that. If it's
Okay.
a business acquisition, and here's the thing that takes time, right? These third-party reports, we have to order, if it's a business, if it's a business acquisition, we have to order a business valuation, right? That's a third-party
Mm.
company that has to do their due diligence. They're going to ask questions, and they gotta come up with essentially a price for the business to make sure, like a home appraisal, right? You're not overpaying for a business.
Right.
If there's real estate involved, we got to order an appraisal on the real estate. We have to order sometimes like an environmental, and if anything pops up, potentially like a phase 1 or a phase 2, those things take time. And so, you know, what's the time frame? I always say, like, it depends how quickly we can get everything back, right? Like,
Sure.
we have to get everything back. We have to review it, check it off the list. So typically 60 days,
Okay.
from beginning to end. But again, it just depends how quick, because underwriting, right? The underwriter might come back and say, hey, I see a few things. I need some additional documentation before I can get comfortable. And then it goes back to the borrower, and it's their job to get us that information. to keep the process moving. And so,
Yeah. And sometimes they don't get back to you right away. That might be an
yeah,
often
everybody,
thing.
listen,
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody's busy, right? We're all busy. But the
Sure.
idea is like, again, we'll get there.
Yeah.
If everything is lined up and if it's approved and it's a documentation thing and we can get those documents, we'll
Hmm.
close. If it's things out of our control that are delaying the thing, then we just got to deal with those.
Okay. All right. So, last question for you, a little bit on the more interesting or fun side. What is a memorable deal, good, bad, or indifferent, from your career?
So obviously there's a lot of great stories, right? Because you just have so many people that, especially with the 7A, where they're buying a business or a lot of starting businesses, and they have kind of exciting stories about, they've been doing this job forever and they want to get out, they want to be a business owner, or they
Sure.
saw this business on, they just kind of were looking at a business website with listings. And, one kind of stands out because it was one of those things where like your phone rings and it's a random number. And,
Hmm.
I picked it up and it was this guy, and he just, kind of that first phone call was just kind of him, like kind of life story, right? Like, I felt like I knew this guy better than I knew some of my family after this call, but super passionate about, kind of opening a gym in his kind of hometown. And
Nice.
startups are always challenging, right?
Hmm.
They're always challenging because there's no historic financials, and especially when it's not like a franchise where you can like collect data to see how that franchise is performing. It was a pure like unique concept type of deal.
Okay.
And but he had a great background, had kind of been in the industry for a long time. Had a good business partner that was going to kind of help him out with it. And kind of came to me and was like, can you work a miracle? And I'm just like, well, I'm not a miracle worker, but I can try to like help you get this loan to start this gym that you've kind of dreamed of your whole life. And so anyways, obviously was able to help him out, and just like super appreciative, and that's
I
always great.
bet.
That's the reward of the job, right? But I'll
Yeah.
say the cool thing is he and social media, right? So he created a social media for the new business,
Okay.
and he told me about it, and I follow it. And he made a post, and it was him on camera, kind of like we are now,
Right.
talking about like, hey guys, I'm bringing this new gym to the area, and kind of going into details, and like to read the comments of like, we're so proud of you, can't wait for,
That's
just
great.
like that was like, I was reading
It's
those and I
just,
was just like, well, that's
yeah, it's
super
good
cool. Like
vibes,
that's,
good feelings for everyone.
oh
Everyone's
man, it
happy
was
for
great.
them. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's really
And
good stuff.
like that's the kind of stuff like you get to see, and it's like that's kind of cool. I had, trust me, I'm just the guy kind of submitting the application, but you kind of feel like you had a little bit something to do with that, and that's
You did.
like
You did
nothing
for
would make
sure.
me happier. Like I'm gonna follow this Instagram, for forever, right? I'm gonna see this
Right.
thing when it opens and everything else, and I think that's like, if I'm ever in that part of town, like you better believe I'm gonna stop by that
Yeah, you're
gym.
gonna support them as much as possible and let everyone know. And yeah, that's great stuff, man. I mean, that really is. It's kind of the old American dream, and it's a lot of stories
Oh,
right now.
100%, man.
Going
It's,
from
it's hard work, right? It's you want to start your own
yeah,
business, you want to buy, like this is the kind of thing you kind of better be all in. It's because you're taking debt as well, right? You're borrowing
right.
money to do this. Like you
You're
better
on the
be all
hook.
in.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, listen, we're about out of time. I really appreciate it. So, we might have to check back with you down the line, but stay well in Nashville, and
I appreciate
we
it.
will talk to you soon.
Absolutely, absolutely. Shane, thanks so much for having me. Always happy to talk SBA for any of those that are interested in the program.
Yeah, and we'll drop your information for sure, your contact information. Everyone, reach out to Glenn if you have any needs, SBA or someone that you may know. Glenn, thanks again.
Of course, thanks for
All
having me.
right. Thanks. Yep.